Hello everyone. Since in our next video we'll have to discuss the literary term euphuism. Euphuism. The spelling is EUPHUISM. See, while discussing euphuism, we'll need to understand some of the literary devices earlier, like maxim, antithesis, alliteration, assonance, rhetorical question, allusions. That's why I'm going to discuss those terms before discussing euphuism. So let's begin with the maxim. Very common word. It's also used in pedagogy of education, maxim of teaching. See, what do we understand by maxim? It is a well-known phrase that expresses a general truth about life. So it's phrase. It's nothing but a phrase. But the condition is that it's well known. Means some phrases are there which are very much circulated in the society in the context of a particular language speaker or speakers. So maxim is a well-known phrase that expresses a general truth about life. See, for example, don't count your chickens before they hatch. See, it's very interesting maxim and a kind of good suggestion as well. Sometimes we start celebrating when we think that some victory is near, but at the very end point we find that, oh, we have missed it. So for such kind of deeds, it's better to remember this maxim: don't count your chickens before they hatch. So half is not done. When a thing is done completely, then only we should count it as the successful trial or as the successful deed. The second one, in the context of marriage, we can say this maxim, and it's very applicable to Indian society as well. What we see generally, see, the maxim is marry in haste, repent at leisure. This can be interpreted differently in different contexts from the different people's point of views. Let's talk of antithesis. It's a contrast or opposition. You understand contrast? Very beautiful word. See, for example, while writing on blackboard, we use white chalk. While writing on smartboard of white color, we use black color marker. This is how, through contrast, we make the thing more visible. So here, antithesis is a contrast or opposition in the meaning of contiguous phrases. See, contiguous, what is contiguous? Adjacent means immediately nearby. Yes. So it's a contrast or a position in the meanings of contiguous phrases or clauses. So antithesis can be seen in phrases or in clauses. I hope you know the difference between phrase and clause. Phrase means just grouping of words. No other condition is there. But when we talk of clause, it has some subject and verb there, even if it's not a complete sentence. It's a clause. In Hindi we call it upavakya. So antithesis is a contrast or opposition in the meanings of contiguous phrases or clauses that manifest parallelism. What is parallelism? A similar word order and a structure in their syntax. Similar word order. See, when we talk of parallel lines, what do we see in that? They go, similarly, but then they never meet. They seem going together, but they never meet. As we see the railway track, two sides of railway track, they are parallel. They seem to go together from beginning to the end. Even then, they never meet. So this is parallel. So antithesis is a kind of device, you can say, a figure of speech, a rhetorical device, which is a contrast or opposition in the meanings of contiguous phrases or clauses that manifest parallelism. So it is used for manifesting, for constructing parallelism. See, it will be clear with the example as following. There is a very good example in Epistle to Dr. Arbuthnot, written by Alexander Pope, where we find the description of Atticus, his psychological depiction we find, and I quote, willing to wound and yet afraid to strike. See, two very dissimilar ideas are coming together. Willing to wound and yet afraid to strike. This is how things are there in nature as well, Don't we see raining in the when sunlight is there? We see different things existing together, very contradictory things, very contrary things. We see their existence together. That is how we find pleasure while having pain, don't you think? See, for example, what I find the best example in the nature, it's about labor pain. Labor pain, you understand? The pain that is being had by a mother before giving birth to the child. See, that pain gives birth to pleasure. When the child is born, at the time the mother is having pain, but the pleasure also exists in the same amount or more than that. So this is how in nature we find opposite things exist together. So here this is about psychology of Atticus, who has will to wound and yet afraid to strike. two opposite emotions existing together in his brain. So he is in the condition of like Hamlet, what to do and what not to do. Okay, let's see another example that is also from Alexander Pope, who writes in The Rape of the Lock, a mock epic. Here we find Baron's design against Belinda. Belinda is the, you can say, female protagonist whose lock was, had by Baron from behind. See the lines that we find in The Rape of the Lock. An example of antithesis. Resolved to win, he meditates the way, by force to ravish, or by fraud betray. See, we are having two words here. One is force, other one is fraud. What is the difference? Force is something that we see very clearly. We know the result. But in fraud, we see the pretension. One pretends what one is not. So force is something done very visually. One understands this, the consequences. But in fraud, we see the pretension. What I think, for understanding this force and fraud, we can understand the difference. One example that we can have is that of a dacoit or a lutera. Dacoit does that, the plunderer does that before everyone. He does not pretend what he is not. He does what he is. But when we talk of a cheater, for example, one behaves as if one is friend, but in reality he or she is foe, an enemy. So that is fraud. So this is how this force and fraud can be taken as their opposites. See, when we talk of opposites, generally what do we understand? We try to remember some of the antonyms, opposites, for the preparation of different exams. But in literature, we don't have exact opposites. It's upon us. We can construct our own opposites as the time requires. Okay. So here fraud stands parallel to the word force, and that makes these lines example of antithesis. Another very beautiful example that I found in M.H. Abrams, it's by Samuel Johnson in his work Rascialus, and the line that is there in prose, and I quote, "Marriage has many pains, but celibacy has no pleasures." It's like that laddu, खाओगे तो भी पछताओगे, ना खाओगे तो भी पछताओगे. So marriage has many pains, but celibacy means being unmarried has no pleasures. See how contradictory ideas are existing together, and that makes it a supreme example of antithesis. And as I was talking, that this example is taken from Rasselas, that was written in 1759. It's example taken from chapter 26 of it, and it's a prose fiction. When we talk of the complete name of this work, Rasselas, it's the history of Rasselas, Prince of Abyssinia, and written by Dr. Samuel Johnson, the great critic of the age of the reason, of the transitional age. Now move to a very well-known literary device, rhetorical device, alliteration, which we generally perceive as anupras in Hindi. But actually, what I think, alliteration and assonance both can be taken as anupras. Okay, so alliteration, it's the use of same letter. Why did I say use? USE? Actually, when we have to use it as a noun, then the pronunciation is use. But when it is used as a verb, the pronunciation is use. So USE, use, that's a noun. USE, use, that's a verb. So alliteration is the use of the same letter or words that are close together. Very simple. Repetition of the same letter or word which are very close together. Usually the term is applied only to consonants. See, that's important to understand. It's applicable to consonants, not vowels. When we talk of vowels, it will become assonance. So it's applied only to consonants, and only when the recurrent sound is made emphatic. So emphasis is also needed there. See, alliteration used to be used in past in Old English as a very rampant literary device. But nowadays in modern English it is used just as for beautifying, for making a for creating a special effect in writing. That's why we find differences in examples of Old English and modern English as well, but we'll have to talk of modern English examples, literary examples. So one example is taken from In Memoriam by Lord Alfred Tennyson. As you know, In Memoriam is an elegy written by Tennyson. See, this particular elegy was very soothing for Queen Victoria, who lost her son at that time. So she could connect herself with it, and she said that it's second after Bible for her. That was the reputation of In Memoriam. And as after the death of William Wordsworth, Tennyson took the post, or got the post, of poet laureate. So this example is from In Memoriam. On the bald street breaks the blank day. So B from bald, B from breaks, and B from blank. They are creating a special effect, and it's called alliteration. That's why I have marked these B sound or B letter with red pen. So on the bald street breaks the blank day. An example of alliteration taken from In Memoriam by Tennyson. Then a very famous example that we find in The Tempest, Act 1, Scene 2 by William Shakespeare, the Bard of Avon. And I quote, full fathom 5 thy father lies. Full fathom 5 father. So this first sound creates an effect in conversation through alliteration. Let's talk of one example from a song written by Terry Sullivan, Terry, Terry Sullivan, Sullivan. And this example is very tongue twisting as well, because we have difference of sounds here. One sir is dental, that we say dant sir in Hindi. The other one is palatal, that we say tala visha in Hindi. So the example is, she sells seashells by the sea shore. See the example. She, palatal, she sells dental, sea dental, shells palatal, by the sea dental, shore palatal. See the coming of sh, s, sh, sh. When you talk of letter, S letter is there. When we talk of sound, then we have two sounds, sh and s. She sells seashells by the sea shore. So it was something about alliteration. Now move to assonance. It's the repetition of identical or similar vowels. So here the focus is on vowels. The repetition of identical or similar vowels, especially in stressed syllables in a sequence of nearby words. So again we are having the example taken from nearby words. So their being near is important, obviously, but sometimes we have the differences, means some particular word comes in between to repetition. That is also taken as assonance or alliteration as their context, according to their context. So here we have repetition of identical or similar vowels. See, for example, one example taken from Ode on Grecian Urn, very famous ode by John Keats. That is the supreme example of Hellenism used in John Keats. Thou still unravished, bride of quietness, Thou foster child of silence and short time, slow time. See, the long I that we are having here, long E I should say, bright, bright, quietness, quietness, child, child, silence, time. So these, eyes that we are having in the words bright, quietness, child, silence, time. As I have, used a red pen for their depiction, they are making assonance here. Another example is taken from very famous poem of W.B. Yeats. The name of the poem is Byzantium. Those images that yet fresh images beget. A sound or E letters that we are having here. One beautiful example from great American poet Robert Frost. His most famous poem, Stopping by Woods on a Snowy Evening. Which starts with, he gives his harness bells a shake. He gives his harness bells a shake. So, E sound in gives and his or I letter. And in harness we have E letter, and in bells we have E letter, that is A sound. So he gives his harness bells a shake. And further, when we move to the last of the poem, the most, one of the most quoted lines in literature for making the people courageous, for making the people laborious, for making the people successful. We have this line in the same poem, and miles to go before I sleep, and miles to go before I sleep. These were the lines which were written in Pandit Nehru's office as well. He was a great fan of Frost. And miles to go before I sleep, and miles to go before I sleep. So O sound in go and before. O sounds. Making these lines supreme example of assonance. Then the example that we take from Wordsworth. See, he wrote a poem. The name of the poem itself is I Wandered Lonely as a Cloud. But this poem is generally known as Daffodils. So don't be confused with these two names. These are the names of the similar poem. It is known as I Wandered Lonely as a Cloud or Daffodils. So the example that we take from this poem by Wordsworth. I wandered lonely as a cloud that floats on high over vales and hills. I wandered lonely as a cloud that floats on high over vales and hills. So O in lonely, O sound in floats, O sound in over. They are creating the effect of assonance. And Wordsworth has employed assonance here to create an internal rhyme. And when I talk of this poem, it's a lyric poem and Wordsworth's most famous work. It was published in 1807. And the name of the collection was Poems in 2 volumes. So these were some examples of assonance. That's all. Thank you.